Last weekend, I visited the Emerald Isle. As usual, I started it from the Amsterdam airport. Um, Wait a sec. My trip actually started it from the night before, when I realized that I probably had made a big mistake and might end up stuck myself at the Ireland's border control. Here's the thing, since I hold a Chinese passport, I must either get an Irish visa or go to Ireland via the UK. Meaning, to be exempt from the Irish visa, I must first enter the UK with my UK visa and then go to Ireland. At midnight, I cancelled my direct ticket from Amsterdam to Dublin, which was non refundable, and immediately booked another ticket to the UK at the 11th hour. So I would first go to Northern Ireland and then take a train to Ireland. What a great plan. Now, back to the gate. I was in Belfast for only an hour before getting on the train to Dublin. My conclusion? Don't visit Belfast if you're not into Titanic, Derry Girls, or the bloody history of the IRA. It may be an affordable place to live in the UK, but gosh, it's so boring. Anyway, my €200 mistake bought me a mini trip to a city I've never been to.
When you asked me to stay over, I said I already told ya. I think that you should get some rest.
No matter what time of day it is, there's hardly any street in Dublin where no one is singing or playing music. Just name a music genre and you will find someone playing it here. With such high quality music performance everywhere you go, it's not surprising that music is one of Ireland's most prized exports. Pop bands like U2, The Cranberries, or Legendary, and are as relevant today as they were decades ago. Remember, Ireland is a country with only 5 million people, less than the population of Boston. Another staple of Ireland is the Irish beer, and with it, the thousands of Irish pubs around the country. I visited the Guinness Brewery Museum in Dublin. The way it showcases how the beer is made and advertised reminds me of the world of Coca-Cola and Atlanta. Guinness is not the beer I would go with at a pub or a restaurant. For me, it tastes like some kind of herbal medicine. However, anything would taste good when it's free and you can overlook the whole city while you're drinking. Outside of Dublin's bustling old city, the sleek-looking district of Docklands is quite the opposite. All the big banks, consultant firms, and luxury apartments are squeezed into this mile-long stretch along the river. The tech juggernauts like Google, Meta, and Amazon are also located within walking distance. Because of its business-friendly policies and its well-educated English-speaking population, Ireland has been a hotbed for American investment since the 90s. And the rate of investment flowing in has only been increasing in the past decade. The large amount of revenue stashed by these big companies sends Ireland's per capita GDP to the roof. Unlike Spain, France, and the UK, whose best days are well behind them, 21st century is the golden time in the history of Ireland. Before Ireland became the Celtic tiger, the country had been the poorest country in Western Europe for centuries. That, of course, has a lot to do with its former colonizer, England.
The story of Ireland and England is complicated, to say the least. Not long after the Normans conquered England in the 11th century, the Anglo-Normans turned their eyes to the small island on the west. But for 5 centuries after the first English invasion, the English rule of Ireland had only been partial, meaning they only control a small region nearby Dublin, a territory which they called the Pale, while the rest of Ireland was still in a very primitive state, where local and native clans constantly fight against each other. During the 17th century, however, the whole of Ireland was finally conquered. To kind of punish the Irish people, the English colonizers confiscated the land of the natives and turned them into plantations. Catholicism was also banned, and the Irish Rebellion in 1641 killed almost a third of the whole population. Everywhere on this island was a living hell at the time, and the relationship between England and Ireland became tense ever since. If you read about how English colonization effort fumbled in Ireland, you will see that England did learn a lot from the mistakes and try to avoid them in their future colonies. Essentially, Ireland was a rehearsal field for the future British Empire, a very tragic one. That being said, you wouldn't imagine Ireland as it is today without the English colonizers. The Irish people can all speak English, of course, but what's more important, in my opinion, is that England also brought in its political system early on to Ireland. The first Irish Parliament was assembled in 1264, only 50 years after the first English Parliament. It wasn't some act of help or knowledge sharing by the English, but rather purely to allow Ireland to raise money on its own. Otherwise, it is always a big financial burden for England. Nevertheless, for the whole period of English occupation, England always lose more money than it gained from Ireland.
The Irish diaspora of the 18th and 19th century spanned from America to Australia. But it was in America that Irish immigrants achieved the most success. Compared with their fellow in Britain, who were seen as second-class citizens, Irish immigrants in the US soon took off their factory hats and became union leaders, small business owners, and some made their way to become the presidents. Even with the influx of immigrants and foreign students in major Irish cities, Ireland's population still hasn't recovered to its peak 200 years ago. Cities like Galway are still less populated than they were in the 19th century. This coast in Galway faces the Atlantic, and it was where a lot of people left for America after the disastrous potato famine in 1850s. Today, it's a park where people come for a walk and let their dogs run freely. Ed Sheeran's Galway Girl definitely helped to promote the city as a tourist destination, but the Galway Girl I met looks rather different from what's in the MV. My third and last stop is in Cork. I didn't confirm this myself, but I heard that people in Cork like to call their city the real capital of Ireland. Again, this has to do with history, since Cork used to be a Catholic stronghold against a Protestant government in Dublin. The Nan O'Nagle place in Cork was a symbol of this struggle. It tells a fascinating story about equal rights in an unequal society. Nan O'Nagle, a nun, found this place as a school in the 1750s to provide education to the poor. The school was operated in secret and was all funded by Nan O'Nagle's own pocket and her family inheritance. Back then, the whole Ireland was under the so-called penal law, which exclude Catholics from politics, land ownership, and education from their own church. The list goes on. The ban on Catholic schools was especially harsh on poor people, because that's the only form of education they could send their son or daughter to. Today, we take for granted the fact that religion and education are separate. But for a long time, the two were inseparable. Nano's school taught about religion, but also practical skills like reading, writing, and needlework. Her legacy was kept through the Presentation Sisters. It's a convent she founded with the mission to provide education and to open schools for the poor. Charity-run or religion-affiliated schools only account for a tiny percentage of today's education system. But in a world where self-interest is advanced at all costs, where ignorance and recklessness are something to be proud of, I think we should be reminded of Nan O'Nagle's effort 200 years ago. Even today, religion still plays a big part in most Irish people's life. The mutual trust and kindness among the people are something I will miss. Have you ever seen a coat sharing station like this? When I was waiting at the gate in Cork Airport, I saw a shelf full of bottled water. You can take one after putting €1 in the box. I mean, what do you think will happen in other airports? But on the other hand, I noticed a lot of things unsettling about Ireland. Street beggars, usually drunk, are in their working age and without any visible disability. Gambling is not a sin in the Bible, but I've never seen this many casinos and sport betting halls in other countries. Young offenders and juvenile crimes are a particular social problem in Ireland. In a society under heavy influence of religion, abstinence and indulgence are often just the opposite sides of a coin.